want to go through establishing a Keyguard design for an iPad. So usually what happens is we just get a picture of the application we need to make the Keyguard for. And then from that image, we have to figure out how big the buttons are and where to put the guards. So one thing to keep in mind, the part of an iPad that lights up the actual screen for the ones we use, they're 210 millimeters wide and 52 millimeters tall if you hold them in landscape. So that's the ultimate dimensions we're looking for. So here's an example of a picture of a Keyguard screen or an application screen that we need to consider. A lot of times, by the time we get these squared, the image will be distorted and we'll have to use ratio and proportion to establish the size of the buttons. But in this case, we had a happy accident in that this is 152 millimeters from top to bottom, and that's exactly the right size. It did distort in the X direction here. That's about 10 millimeters off, which is significant. But if you look at this, we have a lovely central line right here. So as long as we design everything from the center axis, everything should be okay. So what we have to do now, once we have this image and we kind of understand the dimensions and we kind of have thought through, do we have to do ratio and proportion to identify the size of the buttons? We can lay it out on a grid, and usually I'll just kind of work this out on like a piece of graph paper, and then I'll use my image and figure out the distances and kind of lay it out right here. So I know that from the top edge to this first line is going to be 35 millimeters, and from the top of the first row to the bottom of the fourth row is 100 millimeters, and that means each one of these buttons is going to be 25 millimeters tall. I also know that this line A is the center, and if we follow from the center, then we know that it is going to be 210 wide for the whole thing. So if we divide that by 8, because we have 8 buttons, we end up with 26.25 millimeters. So if I start from this center point, then it's 26.25, 26.25, 26.25, and then whatever is left. So we're just establishing these dimensions here and here. So we're going to work from the center point. That way we know this should be fairly centered here, and this line in the middle is going to be exactly in the middle. So that is kind of the first step, going through and identifying the size of the buttons. You'll have to do ratio and proportion sometimes, and then kind of laying out the grid that you're going to design in the Keyguard. All right, that's enough for this video.